Hello, my name is Adolfo, and this is Laugh of Adolfo. Today I'm going to give you a Nº⁵ story, one of my Nº⁵ stories. And I'm going to cover one part, two parts, and three parts so I don't get them all mixed. And this happened in my first 3 to 4 years in the military. And the reason I don't recall what year it happened is because I had 3 deployments on it. I do remember it happened in one of my first 2. I was in the USS Constellation, CV-64. And this happened way back then. So all the regulations that I'm telling you right now, or you might say, wow, you shouldn't have done that. Well, times change, regulations change. That's part 1. Part 2, I was in a barbershop and a customer comes in. He had one of those lines in his head like a Mickey Mouse. He basically got operated. And the reason I say those things is because I had a friend from elementary to high school that had the same thing. And that's how Mickey Mouse got stuck. Just because it looked like this, right? And he sat on my chair and I said, this is the time to tell a story that I remember from a year and a half, 2 years on the same ship. So I started telling him the story and he told me that was me. So the story that I'm going to tell is him telling me certain things because he only knows his side, he don't know the other side, and me listening to third party, as a third party listening to other information. That's part 2. Part 3, this is for people to understand things on the ship before I tell the story. Number 1, on a carrier, there's a hangar bay and there's a flight deck. Hangar bay is where all the jets, planes, and helos are stationed. It's right underneath the flight deck. The flight deck is where the planes take off, they launch, and they arrive. There's also elevators. There's between 3 to 4 elevators. There's in the starboard and on the port side. It's been so long that I haven't been in the military that I don't know which one is starboard or port. So on the left side, there's a hangar bay elevator all the way to the back. And on the right side, there's a couple more. And those elevators take jets and planes up and they bring them down, depending on the usage or the service on the maintenance of the plane that they need to do. There's also something called an island, or we call it island or a bridge. The bridge or the island is on the right side. Right there, the air boss, the mini boss, I believe the navigation is up there. As for the air boss and the mini boss, that's where they direct traffic of the planes, they observe the flight deck, and so on. So there's 2 of them. There's, like I said, there's not 2, there's 1 island, but all those things happen in that area. Like I said, the one on the left is the one with the story. And the reason for that, for the one on the left, is because on the right, that's less risk of taking off and arriving, that the planes might get harmed. So they use those elevators. Or that's the way I was taught. They use those type of elevators for those. It's not for human transferring humans unless the person is with the jet or the helo and so on, taking it up and down. Another thing of this story that people need to understand, that there is divisions and departments. Divisions make a department. For example, I said that I was a barber, I was in supply, I was in S3. Us, the cooks, they are S2, and SKs and AKs, I don't recall all those. I remember S1, S8, and some other divisions, they make the SKs and AKs. And all of us make supply. Supply helps supply. That's the phrase that we always say in supply. Another thing that needs to be understood on this story is that in S2, or the cooks, they need something called FSAs. They are, basically what they are workers from other departments and sometimes division. They go help the cooks cleaning the tables, washing dishes, deep sink, and other miscellaneous jobs, and they gather them from other departments like I mentioned, and those are created as an FSA, basically helpers for the cooks. So now for the story, like I mentioned, the cooks, they have all these FSAs. At the same time, they have this stationary area where they put trash, only S2 or only the cooks. So when they say time to dump trash, they dump it, because we don't just dump trash anytime. There's a specific time, depending where the ship is at, that we dump trash. And for the cooks, they have to have it ready in a certain location so they could drop it off fast, instead of creating a big line with all this trash from wherever location they have it on the ship to take it to the location they have to dump it. For them, they have the elevator by the hangar bay on the left side on this ship. It depends on what ship you're in. Some ships don't have elevators and so on, that they have to go to the flight deck and carry it over there and dump it. But the cooks have these FSAs. In the daytime, they have two guarding that area, making sure that people don't just drop off trash and they just leave. They also make sure that there's no plastic on the trash, so because plastic is going to harm the fishes and animals on the ocean. At night, they probably only have one FSA guarding it, so people don't sneak in at night and drop off their trash. So this happened at night, and the reason it happened at night is because other divisions were already cleaning our place and so on, and sometimes we want to leave it completely clean and we want to go take out the trash, especially in supply. Since supply helps supply takes the trash to that area where the cooks are at, where they put the station area of the cooks, and we drop off our trash there. That day, the FSA said you cannot dump trash. I don't blame him, by the way. The person in supply, which was a SK, he said we always dump our trash. And apparently they got in a conflict. The conflict got so bad that there was tempers. And basically the FSA told them, the person working with the cook said, you can't do that. The other individual, the one that was going to drop the trash, he got mad. He went downstairs. According to the story, he went to certain areas and he was looking for an axe. And they said, no, you cannot have an axe, because they asked him for what? He said, I'm going to go beat up the guy on the FSA on the trash sponson. That's what they call it, trash sponson. And they said, no, you cannot have that. So he's going up and down the ladders, up and down the ladders. And the ladders on a ship, they go from one floor to another. There's a hatch holding it. And this hatch is, I'm not even gonna lie, probably about 60 pounds or more. These hatches are heavy. Now, how do you hold the hatch? There's something called a stanchion. These two bars that you put on each side with these pins, they hold those hatches up in place so we could go up and down. And the reason they have to hold them is because if we go to something called general quarters and they need to drop off the hatch, so there's water prevention and damage prevention. If something happens to the ship, an attack to the ship, those hatches prevent it from going from one floor to another. So this individual is going up and down the ladders or down the ladders, and he's already mad. They already denied him the axe or whatever he was looking for on, I believe it's called, I forgot what it's called, the armory. I'm not sure if it's the armory or whatever, but he's going down. While he's going down and sees these stanchion or these bars, he sees the bar, he disconnects the bar, he goes all the way up to the hangar bay, to the elevator, which was in the hangar bay, and he sneaks on the guy. And he starts beating him and beating him and beating him. As you know right now from the barber story that I said, he had an operation, a metal plate. I don't know how they found out it was him. I don't know how, but then again, he survived. I don't know if he's the one that told them, because everything happened at night. Or maybe they did the 1+1 because he was asking for an axe earlier, or maybe he told other people. This incident happened on deployment. I remember we were nearby or in the Persian Gulf, Arabian Sea or Arabian Gulf, or I call it the Persian Gulf because at one time they changed the name. It was so bad that this individual, they had to fly him to Bahrain and from Bahrain all the way to La Jolla to do the surgery. La Jolla is in San Diego, near San Diego or in San Diego. It depends who you ask. That they had to do this operation. And like I mentioned, I saw him a year and a half or 2 years after it. That's how long he had to be away from the ship for that operation. Now, the moral story, and I wanted to tell this sea story, is not that everything in the Navy is bad. There's things that happen. There's, especially in a carrier is 5,000 people. Things are bound to happen. Things that are in other states, cities, and so on, they're bound to happen in the carrier. I'm not saying gangs, but people used to be in gangs as well. People used to have attitude before, temper, small tempers, and you need to understand those parts while you're in the Navy or in the military. It's not just they made discipline or they gave you discipline that you are now disciplined to do certain things. That doesn't mean that you're not going to go back to your old traits or you still have attitude or temper. Now, do I blame the person that was dumping the trash? Well, after the incident, of course I did. Why? Because hitting someone with a stanchion, and these stanchions, by the way, they're easily about 20 pounds. That's how heavy they are. And on the stanchion, they're rounded. But at the end, they're slightly thin because to hold the hatch, well, imagine this is the top of the stanchion, and this is the hatch. It drops right here, and there's a hole where the pin has to go, so the stanchion doesn't fall, just fall. So it's held in place. And the reason for two is so it will have more resistance and less wiggle room to hold in place. So you have to remember that stanchion was heavy. I don't know how he survived, especially aiming at the head. And that was my sea story, my first sea story that I had. Well, I have multiple sea stories, but that's the one that I consider the most drastic. The good thing is he survived. I don't know how long he was in the hospital, but I assume it was pretty long since the intense, the flying, to basically help him survive. As for the other individual, he did go on restriction. I'm surprised that he only went on restriction. Restriction is you get loss of pay sometimes. You also you cannot leave the ship. And third, a reduction in pay, and you cannot leave the ship. And third is both of them combined. So it could be either one or both of them combined. Loss of pay grade, that's a reduction in rank, reduction in rate. So I do know he was on restriction, and I'm surprised that that's the only thing that happened, because on a carrier, we have a brig. A brig is a jail. But then at the same time, a jail on a carrier, it was only for 10 or 15 days. As for the restriction, if you're on deployment, it's kind of useless. Why? Because you're not allowed to leave the ship. At the same time, we are in deployment. We cannot leave the ship anyways. Yeah, he might miss 1, 2, 3 Liberty ports, but besides that, and those Liberty ports are probably like 5 days. So in reality, he only got like 5, 10, or 15 days that he couldn't leave the ship because we were on deployment. And that's about it. That's the story. After the restriction, I don't know what happened to him. I did not see him. Maybe they kicked him out. I'm not sure. I do know his name, but I don't want to put the names out here. He maybe has his own side of the story. Like I mentioned, I only know the side of the person that got hit, and that's about it. Everything else is he said, she said on what happened before he got hit. Thank you. Thank you for watching.